I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Before we do, though, I kind of wanted to take an informal poll of the audience. I can see that there's a lot of students out there, but do we have certain people that are really more interested in the illustration aspect of children's books? What about the writing of children's books? And what about both? So it's like a perfect crowd for us because we basically have all of that represented up here tonight. My name is Leslie Preston. I'm the head of acquisitions and metadata services at FIT Library. I just want to welcome you to our Love Your Library event. It's the last one of this year. We have a series of events that we host on lectures and on different art-related, curriculum-based presentations that we deal with. We're very excited to have 3 talented children's books professionals here to discuss their work. They're going to be discussing their work, their inspiration, and tricks of the trade. We have writer and illustrator Liz Starin. Yay! Author and art director Colleen A.F. Venable. And professor and illustrator and painter and our very own William Lowe. So we'll start with a brief presentation from each of our guests and followed by a little panel discussion and of course time for Q&A if anybody has any questions. I'm sure you will. Just in time for the holidays as well, we'll have books for sale, their most recent books, and you can buy them over here, and then there'll be a book signing following the event, so we hope you'll stay the whole time. First up is Liz Starin. She's an FIT alumna, whoop, whoop, MFA 09. She's a writer, an illustrator, and software developer. Her books include Roar, written by Tammy Sauer, Splash Dance, and Captain Monty Takes the Plunge, written by Jennifer Mook-Sang. Before turning to the creative side of children's books, Liz was a book reviewer for the Junior Library Guild. And just a little sidebar, she lives with her 2 cats, 3 musicians, and thousands of books in Brooklyn, New York. So we'll have Liz up next.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about my book, Splash Dance, today. And I want to tell you guys how an idea becomes a story. Where's my clicker? Okay, so first I'll just run through a little bit about Splash Dance. So Splash Dance is about a bear named Ursula. She's there on the right. And she does water ballet. So here she is practicing with her friend Ricardo. And everything is going swimmingly. Until the pool instates a new no bears policy. So all of Ursula's hopes and dreams are dashed. So she mopes for a while, and then she heads down to the neighborhood pond, and she happens to come upon another group of water ballet athletes, a group of bears and bear allies who are no longer able to practice in the pool. And they come up with a plan to infiltrate the water ballet championship. So they practice a lot. They disguise themselves as bunnies. And they end up appearing, jumping into the pool, and staging a wonderful performance of their own, and eventually they win the hearts of the crowd and regain access to the pool. So that's Splash Dance in a nutshell. Okay, so how did I get the idea to write a book about a bear who does water ballet? So this is going to start actually in my student days. So this is after I left FIT. I studied in Germany for a year, just because. And so this is me standing in the enormous doorway of my school in Leipzig, Germany. And the name of the school is above the door, and it means like the University for Graphics and Book Arts. And this is the inside. This is like the main atrium of the school. So it was like a much older building than FIT. This had this sort of classical look to it, but it was always just, like you never saw teachers anywhere. I mean, there were teachers, but like, it felt like the students ran the building, honestly. Like it was just always buzzing with something. Like here's shoes hanging from the ceiling. And here's the illustration class setting up an exhibition. And here's part of that exhibition. This is the illustration classroom. And a printmaking workshop. Okay, so the idea of splash dance began when I was in that illustration class. So our professor would give us these very short assignments about once a week. And the assignments, an assignment would be called an Eintagsfliege, which literally means one-day fly or mayfly. In other words, a creature that only lasts for one day. So we would get the assignment in the morning and have crit in the afternoon. And you know, somehow this kind of pressure squeezes creativity out of people. And so on this particular day, we had an assignment. We had to pick a few things out of a hat and make an illustration about all of them. And so the three topics I drew were Pablo Picasso, dancing bear, and public swimming pool. So you might be wondering where Picasso gets into it. But I came up with this idea about a bear who does water ballet, and it was a pretty easy connection from dancing bear, swimming pool. And then Picasso was going to be, like, meeting him was going to be the reward for the competition, but that didn't last. But what did survive, actually almost identical to its original form, what survived into the final book was this sequence of drawings that I did that day. So this is actually from the dummy, but I couldn't find the drawings, but take my word for it, they're almost exactly what I produced that day. So this is the opening sequence of Splash Dance. Ricardo and Ursula were taking a swim. They were practicing their moves for the upcoming water ballet championship. The prize was $1 million, and to meet Pablo Picasso. So they trained and trained. And then I had to get in something about, like, Ursula's day job as a dancing bear, so street performer. That didn't survive to the book, but the rest of that opening sequence survived almost exactly as you saw it. Okay, so I had this character, and I had, like, her motivations and her passions, and so, but as a story is more than just a character. A story needs a plot, and it needs a conflict. So I had to think about how to make life difficult for Ursula, and I think the natural thing that came from my mind was, okay, she's not allowed to go to the pool anymore. So, just stepping back for a second, they say write what you know, and I think people often take that literally. I am not a bear, and I have never done water ballet. But as a teenager, I did swim a lot. So this is from my summer swim team when I was in high school, and you know, you can see the pool in the background, and like having the physical experience of having been a swimmer and spending all this time at this pool, this physical setting, definitely informed a lot of Splash Dance. I think just in its look, and also in my love of drawing athletes. Another thing that helped build the story was, so right around the time I was writing Splash Dance, I experienced some really awful heartbreak. And I'm not going to share any photos related to that, but here's the illustration that came out of that, and kind of the emotional, part of the emotional heart of the story came because I was able to bring that feeling of sadness and rejection into my story. And so this is what happens. So Ursula she gets kicked out of the pool, and then like her really unloyal teammate ditches her because like being in the competition is more important than sticking by her. And so she's just 100% devastated. So that was another thing that I was able to bring to the story. And then the last thing is this. So I wrote a funny story about a bunch of animals and bears who collectively storm a swimming pool and are able to reintegrate it with their actions. This is something that happened in real life. So this is an incident from the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. This is from the Monson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida, 1964. And so a racially mixed group of protesters jumped into the swimming pool at the motel. And here is the owner of the motel pouring acid into the pool. So I wrote a funny story, but this is something that really happened. And just another view. And here is a police officer jumping into the pool to arrest everyone. So this was also one of the seeds of my idea. And it's, that's, those events feel safely in history, in black and white pictures maybe, but, so this is my 5th grade class in the 80s in New Jersey, and our town didn't have a public swimming pool. So the one you saw in the picture earlier is from Maryland, where we lived when I was a teenager, but as a kid I lived in New Jersey, and our town had approved funds. We had approved funds for a public swimming pool, but the pool never got built because enough people in the town didn't want to swim in an integrated pool. And to this day, Bloomfield, New Jersey does not have a public swimming pool. So, now just a little bit about process. So once I had the idea, I made a book dummy, which is, this is pretty standard for picture books. You make like a little mock-up of the book with your sketches and your text in there. And a lot of people just do them completely digitally, but I like to start with a physical object, and then I scan it. And I showed this to people in digital and physical form. And eventually, it got bought by FSG. And so now I'm just going to show a few, like, I have hundreds of sketches, so I just pulled out a few that I liked. So this, you might recognize this spread from earlier. This one, we had to really just play with the layout, because sometimes there's a lot you have to fit onto a page or onto a spread, and it has to make sense, and it has to not feel, it has to feel right on the page. And so I think in this case, like, we felt that Ursula and Ricardo and that, like, the main action in the scene probably had too little space, and like this wall just felt too like it was chopping up the scene. And this is a version of a spread from the middle of the book. We were arriving at the water ballet competition, and it doesn't look like this in the final book. The little box up on the left is the space I left for text. And this is like from a later stage of editing where, so the designer will make, I guess it's called a type dummy. And so they'll set the type and then like send you the type, and you'll kind of like move it around on the page and like try to fit it into the sketch and see where everything goes. And so like this page, which I also showed earlier, we had a particularly difficult time figuring out where to put the text. Like, it really just wasn't going to work on the umbrella there. And I think it ended up at the bottom of the page. And then here are some cover ideas. So like, one really fun thing about Splashdance for me was just drawing animals in all kinds of positions, because like water ballet, I totally made up all these moves. But I mean, Yeah, so an alligator doing a handstand, why not? And another version. So none of these ever made it to the cover. Cover process is really hard because it's not just an editorial thing, it's also a marketing thing. And so like everybody puts their 2 cents in, and you know, the cover really has to speak for the book. It's almost like a poster for the book. And for whatever reason, none of these ideas were cutting it. So here's something that was, I think actually Colleen saw this. She was like, oh, that would be perfect for the back of the book. And I think that's what it was going to be for, but no go. I thought maybe if I did like some sketches in color, that would help everybody really see. And I thought it'd have like a sort of Esther Williams-esque like bursting forth from the water, but that didn't work out either. None of this happened. The cover was the first image I showed. And so, I mean, this is how it goes with the editing process. Like sometimes things come out exactly the same as they were from the start. So here's the first sketch of this page, and here's the final artwork. And then here's this spread, which, I mean, although it's sort of the same in its essence, like the addition of the camel, I think, makes a big difference. I was really happy with this change. And then at the end, here's the reward. So just to finish, I'll just show you a few pictures of my studio. So this is my studio on a day that is not today because it is covered in junk right now because I'm in the middle of something. But this is like a very neat and tidy version of my studio. So like in the corner, I have these flat files and I have a light box. So like I stand at the light box and I use that to transfer sketches onto watercolor paper. So I draw on the watercolor paper in ink. And then I color on top of that with watercolor, and I scribble crayon and colored pencil on top of the watercolor. And so I end up with this big pile in front of me usually because, you know, like I'm drawing and it's a physical activity and there's a lot of action, so I can't be like bothered to put anything back in the can when I'm done with it. And so I end up with this big pile. And so that is the story of Splashdance. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Liz. Next up is Colleen. You can go ahead and go up. She's the author of the book, Mervyn the Sloth is About to Do the Best Thing in the World. And the kids' graphic novel series, Guinea Pig, Pet Shop Private Eye. That particular book has been nominated for an Eisner for Best Publication for Kids and awarded Best Book Recognition from Kirkus Reviews, New York Public Library, Bank Street, and the Junior Library Guild. Along with writing books, Colleen is the art director for Workman Kids Publishing. Thank you.
Hi. So, clapping. I forget that happens sometimes. So I am kind of all over the place when it comes to books because I want to be involved in every single part of books. My day job is working in books, my night is reading books, and then occasionally I get to make books too. Here are some of the books that I've designed. I've designed, I think, over 300 books now, and I had the honor of working for First Second, which is a graphic novel publisher, for 6 years, and I was the only designer on staff. It was a wonderful job and very tiring, and somehow I went from being a junior level designer, that was my entry level design job, and I got a call from these people who said, we chose our 5 favorite books from last year and realized that 3 of them were designed by you. Will you work for us? And they put me in charge of the whole art department for children. I went from never having been a boss to suddenly being the boss of people that were all older than me and all male. It was a little bit of a change. I have gotten better. That's Daniel Nayeri right there, who is actually the youngest CEO of a children's publishing imprint of all time. And together we work in a way that's a lot different than other publishers, where we're obsessed with the book as object. So a lot of times we'll come out with a format for the book, and then we'll find artists and be like, oh my gosh, this person we really love. Like, for instance, Matt Rockefeller, we've been following you forever. Do you want to do this book with us? And we had invented this book where there's a train that goes through the book. It actually drives over the edge of the page. So that was just something that one of our designers came up with. We actually call him our inventor. We all kind of call ourselves inventors. And if another house had done this, they probably would have chosen like very commercial, like cutesy art. For us, we wanted always to be an art piece. It's not just about it being physical, but it's about it being beautiful too. Matt Rockefeller did this in crazy, like just beautiful landscapes, and very quietly behind the scenes, the book actually follows the colors of the rainbow. And you go from the West Coast to the East Coast of America. And it's never said, but it's just one of those little things that, like, it's the things that make a great book. It's the things that when you're reading it and reading it, the third time you're reading, you're like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Those are the things I love about really good children's books. That's his New York City. I love that. Purple, obviously. We also do books that are, again, Brian Wan is another illustrator. I just basically had a list of people that I loved, and I got to give these great projects. And this was actually about how to write books. So I will go through some of these. I should actually probably get to my own books eventually, but I love these so much. And this was a book that came with these cubes that would help teach kids not so much about writing stories, because this is even earlier than that. And that came about because we just didn't think there was enough encouragement of kids to just really play with stories that way. We do a lot of things that are about art itself, books that we wanted as a kid. Like, I was obsessed with drawing books as a kid. I write, I don't draw. But I hated when you had a drawing book and they'd be like, oh, draw on this whiteboard at the back of the book. And you're constantly flipping back and forth. And I was like, why isn't there a book that just folds out the whiteboard? And this is actually a chalkboard that folds out of the book. And that was just one of those things I wish existed when I was a kid, and that's what I get to do for my job. Same thing with sticker books. I was obsessed with sticker books, and I wanted to find a way to do new ways for stickers. So this is actually something we invented as a group. They kept trying to get us to do adult coloring books, and we're like, how about this instead? So that is one of our things. So my own written books. My very first book was called Hamster and Cheese. It is about a pet shop that's very silly. There are actually 6 books in the series, and they kind of have an arc over all the books. It is about a pet shop owner that can't tell the difference between the animals, so he's always putting them in the wrong place. And the only one that kind of has her act together is a guinea pig that I should say she, because everybody gets that wrong. She is like super smart, made her own sign. Unfortunately for her, one day the G falls off her sign, and everybody thinks she's a private investigator and won't leave her alone. This is a mystery. A mystery. A mystery. A mystery. A mystery. I miss it so much. Hey, I found the tree. I missed you so much, tree. I really like mysteries. I think all my books are actually mysteries. So speaking of mysteries, what is Mervyn about to do? I love the idea of a really long book title, too. The hashtag for this book, they keep trying to get me to do like Mervyn, and I'm like, nope, Mervyn the Sloth. It's almost the entire tweet length. I love it. And it's about a sloth that doesn't move and doesn't talk, and he's the star of the book. And every page he slightly moves, slightly. And all these other animals keep crowding around him trying to guess what he's going to do. So we have the bird being like, everyone knows the best thing in the world is, and a prairie dog interrupts with digging. And then my favorite character of the book is this prairie dog that's done with being a prairie dog, who just quietly goes, yay, digging. And then every time you see her throughout the book, she's rubbing dirt off herself, or she's just like, doesn't want to be there. The gazelle thinks it's obviously gazelling. There's a whole lot of guesses, and I just like big menagerie, like big casts. The biggest fight I had for this book was the skunk over there saying, smell me. My publisher thought that was too risque. But you know what? I love it, and I'm very happy. That was the only battle I fought. All the other editorial comments, I was like, yes, yes, yes. Smell me stays. They actually liked it so much that I am doing a new one. So Amy the Red Panda is writing the best story in the world. You're actually the first people to ever see this. It doesn't even have our names on it. That's coming out next September. So along with doing that, I think in a very visual way. I'm actually doing a graphic novel with First Second, and this one is more for teens. And this is the amazing Ellen Crenshaw, who's never done a book in her life. Look at her. Oh, she's so good. I actually just randomly wound up sitting next to her at a convention. If you are an illustrator and you're at all interested in making handmade books, Go to MoCA, go to MICE, go to SPX. That's where I met a lot of the people that I hire. That's also where I met a lot of my friends over time. When Ellen and I met, both of us had photocopied minis we were selling for $1. And now, we're both working for publishers. And these are just her pencils. Like, this is her sketch. I just can't get over it. She's amazing. I also wound up, again, it's one of those things, one person sees your book. The head of SpongeBob, his son, found the guinea pig books in the library, and suddenly I was writing SpongeBob comics. So my biggest thing is always about getting yourself out there. Like, if you put your stuff out there, the right people will find you. If you put your stuff out there, you're positive, and you're doing things you love. I could always tell when an artist is trying to do things just because it's the hashtag that's trending, or because it's like the thing they think that everybody wants. Also, I also notice a lot of artists that when they have their children's book page, it's not as good as the rest of their art. Guess what? Kids are smart. Kids really love good art, and I bet you your favorite children's books are amazing, so why shouldn't your best art also be in a children's book? So talking about when I was a kid. So I was obsessed with 3 things. One was my older sister, but I don't have her listed there, but that's me. I had teeth, I think. I was super obsessed with books. I was really obsessive with mysteries, and I was obsessed with pets, and that definitely led to the guinea pig books, which were basically a list of the pets my mom wouldn't let me have. I was also very, very poor. My mother was a janitor, and my dad was a drummer. Not exactly a super financially stable job, and I only owned 2 books. The 2 books were The Monster at the End of This Book, the beautiful gem of a book, still my favorite picture book. I just got a tattoo of it. I won't tell you. It's on my shoulder. And then this terrifying thing called The Value of Believing in Yourself, which was the story of rabies vaccines. So, luckily, once again, I had this book. My mother still jokes, she's like, that's why you have self-confidence. And I was like, no, that's why I'm scared of needles. Like, the needles were little soldiers, I don't know. So there's a lot of really bad kids' books out there. Monster at the End of This Book, if you've never read it, it is wonderful. As an adult, it's hysterical. It was like, one of the first really meta kind of picture books, and it literally broke the 4th wall. He builds a wall, you turn the page, and you have broken the wall, and he says, do you know you are very strong? Which is also one of the best things to tell a kid, to be like, you just did that, you're super strong. And so funny, but never, I feel like the books that I've always loved are not the ones that are like, here's the message, like hitting you in the head, but it's the one that's like, afterwards you just feel really good, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure why, but like, I feel really strong right now. So my parents both worked, and I had to stay at the library for 3 hours after school. Whenever I say this to like a group of librarians, they're all like, oh. And I was like, I know, you were the free babysitter, I'm so sorry. I was so hyper. This is the entire library. It was very small. By the time I graduated middle school, I had actually read every book in the library. There was only like 6 shelves. But one of them was this book, 600 pages. And the librarian that figured out if you put this book in front of me, I would shut up, is like the best woman ever. And it just had images of every single animal in the world, like the fat dormouse, which I'm like, I just think he was big boned, or like the ratfish that got dolled up for its picture. And it just had these spreads of things, which included the 3-toed sloth. Hello. I got obsessed. I thought they were the coolest. They only poop once a week, guys. Seriously, they're so slow. They're so slow that plants grow on them because the plants are like, I guess you're a tree. I just thought they were the coolest thing. And I also got obsessed with red pandas, which led to his best friend, Amy. Luckily in this library, I always say the best thing you could do is, a lot of people, especially writers, they're like, you have to write every day for a certain amount of time. And I was like, actually, I only write once a week. Because the rest of the week, I'm working on writing, but I'm working on the ideas kind of generating in my head, and I'm reading, and I'm like seeing things in the world, and when I sit down to write, I already kind of have an idea of where I'm gonna go. Things I loved, Amelia Bedelia, Roald Dahl, Calvin and Hobbes, I think like made my brain the way it is. Also, I just love things that broke the standard. Everything else in that page was boxed, and Calvin and Hobbes was breaking out of the boxes. And that's one thing when I'm looking for illustrators or portfolios, I'm always looking for people that aren't afraid to just go outside of what the standard is. I also found this man. This is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He wrote somebody you might have heard of, this guy, Sherlock Holmes. And I was in 4th grade when I first found him, and that's when I got obsessed with mysteries. I loved them so much. I read all his books, and then I got obsessed with this woman. I always put a mustache on all of them because in my mind, if you become a mystery writer, you wind up with that big, amazing mustache that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle has. I think I was as obsessed with the mustache as I was his books. I bet if he didn't have that mustache, I wouldn't be writing mystery novels right now. Just saying, my 4th grade self was into mustaches. So this was Agatha Christie. An interesting thing about her is she has actually written, I believe it's over 250 books, and she is behind Shakespeare and the Bible, the bestseller of all time. She was also writing in the 30s, which was a time when women weren't even writing at all. She was a huge feminist. She was really strong. Her books are fantastic, and they hold up really well. I also love she married an archaeologist later in life after her first husband had cheated on her and she faked her death. If you don't know this story, you should look it up. Agatha Christie faked her death when she found out her husband was cheating on her. And she married an archaeologist, and she would go on him. She traveled the entire world going on digs with him, and she had all these great comments about it with every woman should marry an archaeologist because the older you get, the more interesting you get to them. The one woman, though, that I think really influenced me the most was this one, which most people don't know. Her name is Ellen Raskin, also a beautiful mustache, and she wrote a book that I still to this day read every year. I honestly think there isn't a single word in this book that you can take out and the book would still be as good. It's almost like poetry in novel form. And I read this when I was in 5th grade, and this is when I really decided I wanted to be a writer. So I became a completely normal adult who really wanted to be a writer of mysteries. So everybody always asks me, how does it happen? And everybody knows that you're born a writer, right? So this is me. I was working on a book called War and Peace. It was a little big. I don't know. I think they should have split it into 3 volumes, like War and Peace, but they just put it down. So yeah, that's not true. But everybody knows the real way you become a writer is you find the enchanted stone. And if you can pull out the sword, then you get a book contract. Okay, maybe. Or it's, they say you are what you eat, and maybe you just eat, I don't know. Either way, I had no idea. I had never met a writer. I didn't understand. In my world, they were just completely mythological creatures. So I was like, I guess I just have to start. So I like to have people guess how old I was. Do you think I was 26 years old when I wrote my first book? Was I 8 years old? Or was I 473 and I just moisturized really well? Little kids always say the last answer, and I'm always like, hey! So I was 8 years old. This is me when I was 8. And of course, I did the fanfic route before it was a thing. I wrote a story about me and Sherlock Holmes solving crimes. So I was essentially Watson. But as I was writing the book, I realized Watson's boring, and he doesn't get to do a lot of cool stuff. So I was like, oh, we need a 3rd person that they could do all the legwork, and me and Sherlock will just walk around being cool. So the 3rd person, obviously, is a talking killer whale. That is the book I wrote and sent to Scholastic when I was 8 years old. It was a novel. It was 8 pages handwritten, and it was about me, Sherlock Holmes, a talking killer whale that solved crimes that only existed on the water because we couldn't leave the water. We also time traveled, but that's a whole other story. So that was the first book I wrote, and I kept writing. So I wrote another book a couple years later. A couple years later, I wrote another book. And I started to really get serious about writing. But I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and a lot of people were like, oh, how many books do you think I wrote before I finally got one published? And they're like, I don't know, 5. No, I wrote 31 books. Now that first book was a pamphlet. The other ones were actually books. There's a couple novels in there that no one will ever see. There's a couple graphic novels in there that no one will see. There's a lot of picture books in there. And then I finally hit on one that a publisher was like, I love this idea, I want to do this. And then of course, once you get published, it's super easy after that, right? No. So 5 more books that kind of came and went and didn't go into anything. And you just kind of have to have a thick skin. And the hardest part is leaving those characters behind. And I was really lucky that I had written a graphic novel that was about misfit animals. It was called The Uncutes, and it had a cast of 10 characters. They were all the weird animals in a school. And 2 of the characters that literally existed in one scene were Mervyn and Amy. And it was a sloth that was doing a dance contest. See, dancing. And the only line that Amy has the entire book is someone comes back and she's been sitting there staring at him, and she says, oh, you missed the high kick. It was the best 4 hours of my life. And I just really liked the idea of this friend that was so supportive. They would always be there for their friend, no matter how slow they were moving, no matter what they were doing, they'd always be there. So this is the very first sketch of it, and I'll stop there. But the second book is now, you see the friendship from the other side, and you see how, in the first book, you see how Amy supports Mervyn, and now you see how Mervyn, a character that still doesn't move and doesn't talk, supports her. So it was a really interesting writing challenge, and I'm really excited for people to read that eventually. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Colleen. That was great. All right, so obviously we had to we were getting stiff neck syndrome, so we had to come out into the audience. So next up we have William Lowe. He is Associate Professor teaching in the undergrad and graduate programs of illustration at FIT. He's been working professionally as an award-winning painter and illustrator for over 35 years. 30 of those years, William has been teaching illustration and painting classes focusing on traditional and digital media. He's currently the principal of Cobalt Illustration Studios, a full-service illustration studio that produces murals, paintings, and illustrations for public and corporate spaces. He also produces picture books, gallery paintings, and fine art prints. Clients include LL Bean, United States Postal Service, MTA Arts and Design, Henry Holt, Alfred Knopf, and Philomel Books. So thank you, William.
Thank you. Thank you. It's actually really hard to follow Colleen because she has so much bubbling energy, and I think it's just really terrific having you both here. I think that I know it's being filmed, and for those of you who are in illustration or any of you who are interested in getting into children's books, I actually do recommend that you try to listen to the talks, and particularly with Colleen, because through all the jokes and the bubbly personality which exudes, there are little nuggets of information. As a professor, I'm telling you that there are little things in it that are truly priceless about what it is you need to do, how you need to pursue your craft, how you need to look at what it is you do with so much passion, and why children's books are such a wonderful profession to get into. And I don't mean to put you on the spot there, Colleen, but really a lot of it is that we're not doing this for money. It's just something that we are compelled to do. We like to tell stories. Some of us like to do it with words, and I like to do it with pictures. Now, I kind of came upon doing children's books kind of by accident, because I was mostly doing illustrations for advertising and newspapers. I'll tell you all right now, because most of you are in college, you'll find that your success really is hinged on your developing your network, and that even starts now while you're in school. And a few years after I graduated from college, I became friends who had another friend, and I met this one young lady who was really, really lovely. Her name is Laura. And she wanted to get into writing, and she was doing a lot of editing she's actually writing thesis for master's students for money. And then one day, Laura Godwin got this job as an assistant editor at Harper & Row. And she was very excited about it. She was basically like the assistant to the editor, and she asked me one day, am I interested in doing a children's book? Now, I was really busy doing other kinds of illustrations, and I said I had no interest in doing children's books because I thought that children's books had to be cute, talking bears, that kind of thing. I said, no, I can't do that. And Laura really basically said, no, we don't want you to change for the market. We want you to be you. And so she basically gave me my first, it was just a chapter book, but then when she became an editor at Henry Holt, she asked me if I would like to do my very first children's book. And this is called Wake Up Wilson Street. This is 1992, and I did this in oils. And it was my first picture book, and I had a lot of learning to do. I had no idea how to fit artwork, how to create artwork that would hold the type. And my intention here was to have a newspaper boy, and the type would be on the upper left-hand side. I always assumed that the type in a children's book would be about 12 points. I was shocked to find out it was like 15.5 points. And when the art director said that they couldn't fit the type, they decided to put the artwork in a window so that there'll be enough room for the words. That was kind of an embarrassing start for me. I did another children's book for her about a little dog named Lily, and then one day I did a painting about a Chinese dragon. And for those of you who are in illustration, these are the ideas that sort of come out of yourself without really thinking about a book. You're just doing it just because you love it. And I just did a painting of a Chinese dragon, and Laura Godwin said, "This is a really nice painting. Why don't you do a book about Chinatown?" And I said, "Sure. Who's going to write the manuscript?" And she said, "Oh, you will." Now, I don't write. I'm not a writer. I'm not comfortable with English. I'm a son of an immigrant family, so it didn't come naturally. And Laura had this really terrific idea, and this is a great one for all you illustration students who are here also. She said, "We illustrators, we only create the artwork based on the written word." She said, "Let's take that idea and turn it upside down. Create images of anything that's interesting to you. We'll meet over lunch, we'll look at the drawings, and we'll come up with a story." And basically, that's what I did. I went to Chinatown, I thought about different things, and I just created all these drawings, and we met, and we created a book about a grandmother and a grandson and what they see every single day when they go for their walks in Chinatown. So this is one of the paintings of the people doing Tai Chi in the morning. This is what the book looks like, printed. And it was just great because it was just me exploring my culture, my hometown, the chefs cooking, that kind of thing. So I had been doing children's books for a while, and around 2002, I started to switch over to the computer. And it was really kind of an interesting process. I'll just stop talking and just show you this. So this is a digital painting. It was done in Photoshop, and it was done in many layers. And a complicated scene like this, where you have a person, a boy, standing in the front, he's on one separate layer in Photoshop, and behind him would be the stoop and the man holding the basket on the right-hand side. He's on the second layer, and then behind that is the food vendor on a separate layer. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm moving space around, just trying to figure out the composition. And behind that is a street scene with an awning and some Chinese signs and all these buildings. Now there's a lot of type that goes on in the back. And thinking about my earlier problems with my children's books when I was painting in oils, you know, when you do a painting on paper and you realize that there's not enough room for the text, you're really stuck. You have to add extra room, extra space, or you have to almost repaint it. But this was done on a computer, so I'm actually able to take the entire background and make it light enough so that I can actually add type on top of it. So that's the power of the computer, which I think is really kind of interesting. Now, quite recently, I found myself actually going back into oils, and I've been doing quite a few. I think I've done about 14 children's books now at this point. And I said to Laura that I wanted to do something different. And she said, well, why not just do a book in oils for a change? And so she gave me this really wonderful manuscript by Brenda Guberson. And it's a book about dinosaurs and how many of the early dinosaurs had feathers. So I'm just going to show you some of the drawings in the development stages. This is a spread from, oh, you know what? I just realized I don't have everything. Sorry. I don't have it. It's okay. I'll just talk about the cover, okay? We'll just talk about the cover, this thing. Okay. Forget about that. That's actually a page from the dummy. It was I just did the drawings based on all this reference, and I would put it in InDesign, just to try to figure out how the type would look with the words, and if it didn't fit, then I would move the animals around. This was a drawing in Photoshop. Now, this is a finished illustration for one of the interiors for feathered dinosaurs. And covers are really hard. I know that Liz had gone through an awful lot with the cover committee. And the preference is to actually use an illustration from inside the book. So they came across this painting of the Archaeopteryx, and they wanted to use that for the cover. But they had a couple of very specific changes, and they came up with this particular layout. They needed for me to take the dinosaur and shift it over to the far right-hand side so they can add type to the left-hand side. The dragon actually needed to, you will see, the dragonfly needed to be shifted over closer to the dinosaur. And also the area where the type is has to be legible, so that somehow I need to make that background darker. Now, this is an oil painting. It was finished, and they wanted for this to become a cover. And my wife looked at me and she said, "Don't you dare do another painting." But I know Photoshop. And all the tricks that I teach all you guys who I've had in class, that's what I do in my own illustrations. So the plan was to actually add the extra space on the computer and slowly add in the missing pieces to finish off the cover. And so by the time I get to the actual final, which is this, you would never know the difference. So the whole thing about the friends that you make, the connections that you've made, you know, I've been really happy. I've been lucky to have a friend in Laura Godwin, but that would be true for you guys too. Like the people that you know now, you never can tell what will happen, where it will lead you in the future. And for me, one of the greatest joy was that Laura realized that I became a Christian very late in life, and she asked me if I wanted to do a Christmas book. And I just said, yeah, absolutely, I really, really do want to do a book. And this is the first time I ever had a chance to work on a book with her. And do we have time for me to show them the dummy? It's okay? All right. Because I just want to show you what a dummy looks like. A little while ago, actually, and earlier this semester, I asked, oh, it's not here. What happened to the flash drive that was? Oh, I'm sorry. I just have to keep on talking. What am I going to say? Oh, no. Okay, I know what I'm going to say. Thank you. I gave my class an assignment. Thank you. And it was a homework assignment, and it was, this is not the flash drive. Thank you. Thank you. And I gave them a homework assignment and said, pretend that someone had a manuscript to give to you and wants you to do an illustration for the book. Would you say yes to the project? And if the answer is no, what would it take for you to say yes? You'd be surprised how many people said no. Oh, I can't, I'm so stressed out. Never say no. You always say maybe. But it is hard. I mean, it's hard to find time. And Laura Godwin sent me an email with just a very simple Christmas story as a poem. And she said, here's an email, read this thing, what do you think? That's all she said. So I read this book, this poem, and I said, oh, it's nice. Who wrote it? I did. I said, oh, it's cool. Well, do you want me to do the book? She goes, I'd love you to do the book. And I said, do we have a contract? No, we don't have a contract. So this is a situation where I'm telling the students to really be careful. You don't want to do too much work. And generally speaking, if someone were to approach you with an idea, because you're all artists, you're going to find any parent who's ever had a kid who would read a book to a child would say, oh my God, this is so easy, I could even write a book. So they write this thing, and then they realize that they can only do stick figures, so then just trying to find an artist to do the artwork. That's where we come in. And I presented that idea to the class, and Laura had the same situation for me. And she came up with this idea. She didn't have a contract. And I said to her, okay, I can't do too much work because I don't have a contract, but I will give you enough so you could try to sell it. So this is the dummy. It starts off with just an end paper of the sun is setting. This is in Bethlehem. And you start off with a man putting a harness on a donkey. This would be the copyright page. The title page, you show the saddle going on, the blanket going on top of the donkey. Then it starts off, see this small gray donkey, this long dusty road, this promising star. And then it pulls out to where you see Joseph and Mary and the donkey walking down on a clear Bethlehem night. They see the inn with no rooms. So this is the only color that I do for them. This humble stable, beckoning, the simple manger with the smell of sweet hay. Then we see the three kings. Really, really rough, just enough to figure out the pacing of the book itself. Then we have a couple little individual vignettes. Here the cattle lowing, the doves cooing. Another page of vignettes. The lamb bleating, the mother sighing. And whenever I talk about children's books and the construction of a book itself, I always use the analogy of, you think of it like it's a piece of music. Something's loud, something soft, something staccato. Bum, bum, ba, 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 ba. And that kind of cadence kind of sets a rhythm that helps to carry the story. Then it opens out to a wordless spread. Actually, the lamb's bleating, the mother sighing, and then it becomes a wordless spread because the baby is here. Then the angels arrive and they're singing. They're welcoming this tiny baby boy. And then it reads, feel this hush, and the king have arrived. And then we slowly pull back. This peace on earth, we go further back, this first Christmas night. And then it becomes the other end paper. And that was the dummy itself. And I want to show you what it looks like as a finish. And we'll go through this much more quickly. This is a really, really, it's kind of a low-res version, and this is the actual mechanical that came from the publisher. I believe that the books are here, right? I think so, yeah. Okay, this is the end paper. I love seeing my name next to Laura Godwin. I really do, because we've been friends forever, and we finally got a chance to do a book together. I don't have to say anything. I'll just go through this pretty quickly. And for those of you who know computer artwork, this was all done in Adobe Illustrator. So for those of you who are in school, this is just a rough, it's not the final version. For those of you who are still in school, you might think that having achieved all these books is something that's unattainable. I mean, when I was in college, I had no idea what my life was going to be like. All I know is that I had this thing inside of me that I wanted to create. Like all of our guests here, they just love what they're doing. And really, you just have to figure out what that is for yourself, because something will happen if you just keep on making connections. Life is full of surprises. Thank you.
Thank you, William. This was great. I just want to invite anyone at any point to come and purchase a book if you have to leave early, because we're going to launch into the Q&A now. And I would like, I'll just go ahead and go up on the stage. I would kind of like to mix it up a bit where I'll just launch us off and ask a few questions, but I would love it if you guys could think of your own questions and then we ask for a little audience participation, because I think it'll make the evening a little more relevant than just my standard questions that I'm going to ask. So I think a good starting point would be, what do you think, and anyone can tackle this, what's the best advice you would give someone who wants to get started in the market? Like what nugget?
I just can't use the mic. Is it working?
It's a very huge question, but.
I always say put your stuff online. The best people in the industry right now, all the art directors are looking for stuff online constantly. And draw what you love. If you're a fan of something, do fan art. A lot of people I found because I was like, I like this show. Ooh, who's that artist? There's a lot of that happens in publishing. We're all story lovers, and that also translates to movies and TV. Have a really clean website. Be active online. I always say the best thing you could ever do is just don't be a jerk. It sounds simple, but it's really like a hard thing. I actually got my start, my first job in design was because I did a webcomic for 4 years. That was a photo comic with stuffed animals in public places in Brooklyn. It was weird. And an editor saw it, and she thought it was hysterical, and she offered me the guinea pig contract. And it was just something I was doing for absolutely no money that I just was finding amusing to myself, but I did it every single week, and eventually people started to notice.
I actually have a follow-up question about that, about creating fan art. Because I know a lot of students who have asked about creating fan art, and they are almost apologetic about doing it. And I'm just kind of curious, why do you suppose people feel that way?
I guess because it's not their own characters, and they feel like they haven't invented it or something like that. But I've seen some fan art. There's one picture in particular I show usually that's an outline of Totoro from My Neighbor Totoro. And it's just this amazing landscape inside of it, and parts of the landscape are coming out of him. And it is if you showed that to anyone, they'd be like, that is fine art. That's beautiful. And it just happens to be something that relates to a movie.
So another thing I wanted to say about getting into children's books, read picture books. Read lots and lots of picture books. Read so many picture books. Because this is a very specific form with its own limits and rules, and sometimes you can break those rules, but you have to know how picture books work. And I think, most of us read picture books as a child, and I think a lot of, as adults, I think a lot of us have sort of a nostalgic idea of what a picture book is, and I find that doesn't really mesh with the reality of what a picture book is. So read lots and lots of books, and then stop reading lots and lots of books and develop your own voice.
What about you, William?
I don't know. I think that as a teacher, I find I'm always trying to drill into my students that the need to explore who they are. But I think that's really pretty intimidating. It's really hard for students to do that because you're bombarded with so much information from all your different classes, so many different kinds of pressures. And I think that to get started, you probably need to find a quiet space where you could turn the volume down and all that external influence and just figure out who you are, what kind of a person you are. Because I said this to Liz earlier, that if you don't mind me saying that, when Liz was my student when she was going for her master's, and I had not seen her children's book work until after she left the program, and I was so genuinely happy to see the work. And I saw it before tonight. I've always known about it. Because when I saw the work, I realized that inside the drawing, with the nervous little line and all, was her personality. So I think that a lot of that is just learning to draw so much and draw so well that you know who you are, and somehow it comes across. And I tell my students, you want to create artwork that will make your mother cry. Then you know you hit an audience. You touched on someone's feeling. Because if you could touch someone, then you have found your audience. And in many ways, that's when you understand yourself, then you can then you can figure out what kind of stories you can tell.
Thank you. All right. What do you feel are the challenges in bringing a manuscript to life, either from writing it yourself or from the illustrator? What are the challenges with this? How did the finished book vary or evolve from your initial vision of the book? And can you give any particular examples? Whoever wants to go.
Well, I could talk a little bit about Roar, which is the first book I did, and I didn't write that book. I think so that in itself is its own challenge for an illustrator to work with an author instead of being both of them at once, because when you do both, you can kind of let the words and the text, the words and the art emerge together in this singular vision that's all your own. But when somebody else is writing, you have to figure out how to meet them somewhere, I guess. And so the particular challenge of Roar was that it's entirely in dialogue. And so it's like a little piece of theater that way. And there's not really very much to indicate setting or props. The book is all dialogue and all character. And it was kind of hard to figure out where to put these characters. And they ended up in like a very sparsely populated kind of white space, but like I had to find ways to make them interact so that they didn't look the same on every page, because it's like 3 or 4 characters, and most of them are on every page. So like, how do you make something visually interesting out of that?
For me, it's realizing your first draft is going to be the worst thing in the world. No matter what you do, every single time, your first draft will be horrible. Your first draft is not really your first draft. Maybe your 5th draft is the one that you actually show people. The first draft I did of the guinea pig books, I would actually say it was terrifying. I got the book contract based on my webcomic. And they're like, here you go, here's a bunch of money, now write a book. And I was like, ugh. And I didn't write for a year and a half. I was frozen. I was terrifying. And I finally wrote a manuscript, which is so bad when I read it now. And my editor was just so smart, Carol Burrell. I love her to death. And she kind of went to me and she just asked a couple little questions. And it was so smart. She wasn't like, oh, you should change this, change this. She's like, isn't it interesting that the least interesting character is your main character? And I was just like, what?
Oh my God, that's really bad.
Yeah, I know. She's like, what are her hobbies? I was like, detectiving, I don't know. And because of that, it actually became this thing. And she kind of said, like, what kind of characters do you wish like existed when you were reading books as a kid? And, you know, I had already come up with the idea that I wanted her to be female, because I was like, there weren't that many female detectives unless they were little old ladies. Like, I wanted to be like, cool female. And then the idea, too, of making her, she became a lot like MacGyver. She basically could take tools from everywhere, put them together. I was also very specific in the character design, and I was like, she will not wear heels, she will not wear a giant bow, there's no 3 giant eyelashes, and she definitely will not have boobs. I was like, and because of that, even like professional journals have written about her as if she was a guy, just because she's so badass. They're just like, oh yeah, it's like cool, like she could build all this stuff. I'm like, her name is Sass Pants. It's a girl, sorry. Little boys get really upset. But it was just having that editor be so gentle with me when she really could have been like, why did we give you this money? And since then I've learned, like, you know, you just have to keep editing and editing and editing, and eventually there's a great story within every story.
William, do you identify with any of this?
The writing is hard for me. Words don't come easily for me. I think that, but I've had my share of manuscripts that were handed to me. And when people realize that you're a children's book illustrator, they all give you the manuscript. Even, it's terrible, not terrible, it's just crazy. And even the school bus driver was coming by to pick up my son, and he opens up the door and goes, hey, you do books, right? He goes, yeah, I got a book for you, School Bus Safety, run with it. It's like, wow, that's Caldecott territory right there, isn't it? School bus safety. And everyone has an idea. The hard part is really coming up with the visuals that help to carry the story. If it reads like a bunch of talking heads, then I can't see it. I don't know the weather. I don't know the time of year. I don't know what the town looks like. So all that stuff you have to make up, and you're kind of creating it out of a vacuum. So it doesn't come easily for me, because I do say no to a lot of stories. But when I try to write something, it's agonizing, because I'm just not good at it. So I have a very good editor to help me.
Okay, does anybody have any questions? Okay, here we go.
Do you use children in any part of the process ever, like as a test audience or?
No.
No.
William?
Well, I use my daughter. She is actually really great at telling me what's good and what's bad. And early on, when my first picture books were all nonfiction, and my son would say, Dad, you're like a funny guy, but why are all your books like so boring? But those are the books that I chose to do. And so as a result, I started to do other kinds of books like machines. I did the dinosaur book to make him happy. And I recently just did a book about a battleship. And my son was very excited about this battleship book. But it turns out that it was a ship called the Vasa. And it was a Swedish warship built in the 1600s. It was like the pride of the fleet. And it was so heavy, top heavy with cannons and sculpture, that it literally sunk on its maiden voyage. So my son is reading this manuscript, and he looks at me and goes, really, Dad? You chose this?
It's nothing like kids to keep you grounded,
They're
right?
tough. They're tough.
I will say though, if I don't find it funny, a kid probably won't find it funny. I don't expect like them to have like this.
Yeah, I'm always trying to
Like if
make
it's not funny
myself
enough for
laugh.
me, it's like
Yeah.
I laugh real easy.
And I do want to share a little bit of a famous quote. So there was an editor at Harper and Row in the middle of the 20th century, Ursula Nordstrom. I did not name my character after her, but she was formidable. But anyway, so I think it was Anne Carroll Moore who was a very powerful children's librarian in the New York Public Library. She basically invented children's librarianship. And Anne Carroll Moore said to Ursula Nordstrom, "What qualifies you to be a children's book editor? You're not a librarian, you didn't go to college, blah, 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 blah." And Ursula Nordstrom says, "Well, I am a former child, and I have not forgotten a thing." And I mean, and that's true for all of us. I'm always talking to myself about what I like about this work.
We had a few more questions here.
Hi, thank you everybody for the valuable insights that you've given us. I also share the passion for children's books. I write. I feel really bad because I feel like I have two left hands for drawing, so I don't illustrate. And I've written stories and I've sent a couple to some people that opened the door for me recently. And one of them, I got feedback, and I was told that it was okay, but I needed to add conflict to it, and I also was told that I needed more dialogue in it. So my question is there a balance? Like how much dialogue in a text, or how much the pictures or the drawings have to say instead of the text, or the other way around?
I mean, it really depends on the book. Some of my favorite picture books of all times actually have no text. The Arrival by Sean Tan is just stunning, and it's just visuals. Again, I always say, look at the books that you love and you most want to fall into the hands of the kid that loves that book. So if they love this book, they're going to love your book. And kind of then see kind of how much text they have there. Again, like Liz was saying, like reading other books, that's the best way to find it, because there is no formula. Also, especially if you're writing older things, like people are like, oh, well, this many words is a middle grade and this many words. It's like, no, it's when it's done and it's when it's good. Like, it doesn't really matter. Some picture books are really long, and a lot of them have very sparse words or no words. So
I have an exercise for you. So I just taught a class on picture books, and this is one thing we had our students do. So try taking one of your stories and rewriting it in 250 words or less, and see if you can get the whole story in there. So you're going to have to leave some things out, and think about the things that could be said in the illustrations, because you want to leave the illustrator something to do, because they're a collaborator with you. They're not just a hired wrist, as somebody put it to me once. So think about things like physical descriptions. You don't need to physically describe things, because that will happen in the illustration.
Hi, thanks for coming. My name's Daniel. So if I have an idea for a book that I want to write and illustrate, how much preparation should I have, and what should I actually bring to somebody that I'm meeting? And should I meet with a publisher or try and find a literary agent?
that's always a catch-22, because they're like, you can't get an agent unless you're published, and you can't get published unless you're an agent. That's not true. If it's a really good book, people will take it even if they say they don't take unagented things. Get in front of them. There is a CPWI, join it, go to the conferences, meet with the art directors. They'll have one-on-ones where you actually get to show your stuff. And that's even more helpful, because not only are you showing it, they'll give you helpful feedback, and then you'll have that in later on where you could go back to them and say, hey, look, I implemented these changes. A lot of times then they'll have a dummy, they'll have some final art. But again, it's the same thing, like you want to give the illustrator room. You want to feel like the editor and the art director have room. So, the dummy doesn't need to be totally complete. You don't need to be totally done with the book to sell a book.
Do you all know what SCBWI is? It's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And is that an org?
I think it's .org.
Yeah, it's scbwi.org. And they have conferences, winter conference in New York, and they have a summer conference in California. There is a local chapter. I don't know, I've never been to one of their meetings before, but I know that writers and illustrators do come together. It seems like the writer portion of the SCBWI is more together than the illustrator part of it. Is that true? That's my feeling. I don't know why. I think we kind of, artists, we tend to be insular. We stay to ourselves, and we just stay in our little hole, just draw these little drawings, and writers just say they have to meet people. I don't know. It's. I want to just touch on your earlier question also. That I think that about the manuscript. I think it's important to polish your writing, of course, especially if someone has gracefully given you some advice, but also that one slide about how many books it took for Colleen to become printed is a really important thing, that you should not rely on that one gem to make your name. And in your case, sir, you know, like if you want to always have an idea, you always want to say, okay, this is a great idea, it's just bursting out of me. Here is a dummy, which is basically a couple of drawings, and you can have the manuscript written out as Microsoft Word file, but then it's like you got like maybe 6 more ideas that you just haven't had a chance to put down on paper. When you come to meet someone, you have that kind of energy and enthusiasm, I think it does come across in the meeting. And SCBWI is definitely a good place to go.
Also, if you approach an agent, they're going to want to see that you have more than one idea. Like when I found my agent, that was just part of the submission process. Like, okay, I like this thing you sent me. Do you have anything else?
They don't want a one-hit wonder. They want someone they could build a career with.
What about self-publishing? I mean, I know, but I'm sure it happens. And so what advice, or would you not advise people to do that?
Do you like mailing packages? Yes or no? No, in the comic book world, it happens a lot, and those ones are ones where I've had friends where they're like, I want $5,000, and they're like, here's $90,000. And they have had a very, very hard time because, one, they weren't expecting that, and then suddenly it was all this pressure, and two, they were mailing out hundreds and hundreds of packages for years. Also, if they weren't on their deadline, they got a lot of angry emails all the time. Kickstarter is great if you have a very good business sense. Most publishers will still consider your work if you have done a Kickstarter, but I mean, there's definitely that thing of like, oh, well, it's already out there, and it definitely kind of brings it back a little bit. It is a disadvantage if you do want the distribution. It's extremely hard to get your books in bookstores. It's very hard to get them in libraries. You know, when you are doing self-publishing, yes, you could sell a lot of books at one time, but are they going to live on after that Kickstarter, after that Indiegogo? Usually it's a blip and then nothing.
I think it's difficult to do well because it takes a lot of different roles to produce a picture book. So there's the writer and there's the illustrator. There's also the designer or art director. There's the editor, copy editor, marketing people, there's distribution. Like, that is so many hats, and most people don't have all of those skills within themselves.
Invariably, what happens is that a lot of people, they will have the Adobe Creative Suite, and they figure, oh, I've got InDesign, I could just make a book. And it's
not that
like,
easy.
No, it's like saying, I've got Photoshop, I could create the artwork. And it's really not the same thing. There's something to be said for being able to hire someone who has a good, and respecting the design sensibility. And then because you also want a good editor to make sure that the words really work well with the images, you know, stuff like that.
Okay. Hi, I have 2 questions. It's probably more for you, my first question, because I'm still I'm a freshman here, so I'm just starting out. But is it worth, I had this story with my grandma for a while that we wanted to get published and made into a children's book, but is it worth waiting until I'm develop my style and skills more until I start to actually do it, or can I start to do it now?
That's a tough question because I don't know your work. If it's a story that feels really close to you, and somehow the artwork that you create when you're just creating artwork for yourself, like in your sketchbooks, if you find that body of work would fit with the story that you have in mind, then I say go for it. But if you are trying to create something, you say it was a grandfather's story?
Yeah, my grandma's.
Yeah, so that comes with there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes along with that. So, I don't know, there's so many variables, but my guess is that if it feels right, you should just at least get a couple of drawings out of it, but don't aim for doing the full 32-page book. And that's true for a lot of you guys. Like, if you really want to get into this business, you don't really have to do the entire book. To create artwork for 32 pages is easily a year and a half to 2 years worth of work. Liz? 2 years?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah.
I just finished one.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So you only need enough just to get the idea across. And I think that just that learning process is really important. So the short answer is, if it feels right, then do it. But make sure that it's the thing that you really want to do.
Oh yeah, I had another question too. If you have a character that you really love in a story, but like it never gets published like for a long time, should you like be persistent with that, or should you just like totally abandon it?
I could name so many characters in those blue books. I kind of feel like there's some characters I'm going to come back to, and actually some I have. You know, I wrote book 12 on a character, and then, you know, it wasn't until book 22 that I was like, wait a minute, I really know this character now. I feel like everything is kind of a draft leading to another thing, even if it's a totally different concept, you're learning something from it. If there is a character that keeps coming back to you, there's probably a reason why. And there probably is something there that is unique about that character, and you should kind of like step back and see what it is. My friends actually call it finding your sloth, because I had a very long graphic novel I did, and literally one scene had a sloth in it, and he became an entire book on his own that sold very fast. I waited 6 months to get the comments on that graphic novel, and it was like torture, because every few weeks you'd get another rejection, and it was just every few weeks you get another rejection. After a while you're like, really, just stop rejecting it. I don't need to know, don't tell me. And then 3 years later, I just kept thinking about that character and how much I loved the friendship of those two. And I just had the idea of Mervyn. I wrote it down. It was very tight because I'd been thinking about it for 3 years, and it wound up being a 7-publisher auction in 2 days. That doesn't happen. It will never happen again to me, and it's cool it happened, but like that's the difference between like just living with the character, and everything you do is a first draft. I mean, start working on the story for the grandmother story now, and you could just keep tightening it, and then when you do show it to someone, it's really as fine-tuned as you want it to be.
But it's also important to have the ability to let go, either of something that you've done that maybe just isn't finding its audience, or within a project you're working on, somebody's going to tell you to cut something. And you might fight for it, but it might be a better story without that thing.
Okay, we have about 10 more minutes before we're going to do the book signing, so get those hands up.
Hi, kind of a complicated question. I know each of you does a lot of different things, I don't know, for work, not just the writing and drawing. And I want to ask, how do you find a good balance between, I don't know, paying the bills, but also just doing what, you know, you want to do, making up your own stories, like finding the time for it and not getting burned out? Like, how do you do that?
Okay, my answer is a little different. But, so I'm very fortunate to have a logic brain also, so I'm also a programmer. I think having a day job is a great thing, and programming happens to be a pretty secure profession right now. So it's nice to not have to fight for some of the kind of the bread and butter work that some illustrators end up doing, I think, like random graphic design jobs or something. I mean, I'm not a designer. I'd much rather be a programmer than like do these sort of side things that are sort of like illustration but aren't illustration.
I mean, I have a very, not strict schedule for myself, but Monday nights I go to a pie shop and I eat pie and I write. And it's the only day of the week that I write, and I actually have, on my Google Calendar, there's another color that I use for the days I wrote. so they're red. And I could look at a month and be like, oh my gosh, I only wrote 2 days last month. Or I look at a month and it was like, whoa, I was really like, every day I had the urge to write. But I only forced myself to sit down, again, with pie. I believe that's like the main thing, once a week to do that. Again, I'm very lucky now to have a day job I love. That was not the case for me in the past. I was very overworked. I used to work till 9 or 11 every night and every weekend. Then I felt so much more stress, and I honestly think the reason why I had so many books that weren't successful was because it became my out. I kept being like, if I could just write the good thing, I could quit this job and I could have a life again. And because of that, my writing was more forced. I was also giving things to people before I really gave it time to be edited. And I think, you know, having a day job you like, or even a part-time job, I believe that every artist should leave their house occasionally. And you think that'd be a normal thing to say, but I have so many cartoonist friends.
I just left the house for the first time in 3 days.
It's hard. It's really hard. It's like, get used to working in a coffee shop. Go to the library and work there if you're afraid that you're going to eat too many brownies.
I mean, you saw the pictures of my studio. It's a nice place.
Yeah. I think everybody has a sweet time of the day. My boss, who also writes books, he writes novels, he writes every morning from 6 to 7 in the morning. And I think also like just writing in short bursts is actually a really good thing for a lot of people. It's easier to like sit down and be like, you don't have that time to stare at the wall to be like, what do I want to do today? Because you're like, I have to work right now. Working on your lunch break, that's another good thing. Just getting in the habit of saying, okay, on Thursdays on my lunch break, I do this. Don't think of it as precious, because a lot of people that write or illustrate, they're like, oh, well, I can't do it unless I have this kind of chair, and I have to be sitting here, and the sun has to be coming from this direction. And, you know,
Wow.
You just have to learn to work differently. You know, I used to have a very, very small apartment, and I decided that one side of my couch was my work side of the couch, and the other side was my watching TV side.
Or eating pie.
Exactly. And I just needed that distinction. So I was like, when I am sitting here, I am working. You have to just find what works for you. There's actually a really good book. Oh my gosh, I think it's called Daily Rituals, and it goes through about 100 people, and it goes through artists, it goes through writers, it goes through a lot of people through history like Benjamin Franklin, and it just tells you what they did every day and how they kept their time. And it's just 100 people that did amazing things, and just reading that, and every single one is different. There's no formula, so you just have to find your own formula.
Maybe maintaining some kind of a journal, a visual journal, getting a Moleskine where you write down your thoughts, your little observations, your little doodles, and just fill it with your day-to-day life. If you have to work, you have to work. New York is an expensive town, and there's no way around it. But at the same time, it's like a glass half full or half empty. You know, if you are doing a job and you hate it, then you shouldn't be doing the job. But find a part-time job that you will enjoy, and then the glass becomes half full. And you can actually look at everything as ultimately an experience that gets you out of the house. Because all you did was stay inside the four walls of your studio and say, I am now going to create. You know what? You're not going to create. It only happens when you're out there. So embrace it. I mean, you have to survive, but find a happy medium. And I think the journal would be a good thing.
Anyone else?
Hi. I just wanted to ask, because I myself have been struggling in between like the comic book world and children's books, and also like the fine art part of it. And I feel like when I post, I'm constantly like debating whether I should be a fine arts person or like a children's book person. But I know for a fact that I will create children's books. But yeah, I think like consistency is like something that's like overpowering, and I'm not certain if like that's that important or if it's just about each individual piece.
I mean, I love to see artists that have a variety of things on their website. You could even make it that there's separate sections, but I kind of love seeing the portfolio where you see that they're actually trying things. I could see an artist that's really, really good, but if they only do the same thing over and over again, in my mind, I think that's the only thing they can do. So I think having separate things, I mean, when it comes down, tagging is a big thing. making sure it's tagged so that if someone was searching for like Kidlit, they would find like your art that's for kids' books. Or even just, if you're on Twitter, just going into whenever they have like any of the days where it's like Illustration Friday and it's run by mostly kids book people, or, again, the Kidlit thing, there's a tag there too. And just let it be seen by those people. But I think on your own personal things, like on your, like any websites, you should definitely like, don't hold yourself back. Like if you love the work you're doing, like don't feel like you need to compartmentalize all the different styles.
And in terms of your own artistic development, like what you should spend time on, I guess, you don't have to figure that out right away. Like you'll see what feels the most right to be doing, and then, hopefully the things that feel right, you'll do more of those things.
What department are you with, may I ask? Well, marketing is good too.
That's where I got started. I was very loud in cover meetings, and then they were like, hey, you want to design? I was like,
Colleen is a super talented self-marketer. I just want to say that.
I think we should take just one more question, just because of timing. But afterwards, the writers and illustrators will be over here signing books, and anybody can talk to them individually to continue the conversation.
Hi, I'm freshman too. I'm kind of worried about my future, so I'm curious about you guys, the first job of your guys, or did you have ever go to any internship? And do you suggest us to go anywhere for the first job or something?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit of a wise guy, I guess, but so I didn't major in any kind of art thing at all. I came to FIT later as a master's student, but like before that, I had very little formal art education. So for a while, I was pursuing a career as a scientist. So I don't know, something to keep in mind. You don't have to figure it out right away.
I do think if you have the opportunity to do an internship in a publisher, it's amazing to see all the different jobs. Also, like working in comics, there are so many jobs that if I had known, like when I was a freshman in college, that coloring was a job. Also, if I had known when I was 5 that coloring was a job, even lettering is a job. It's just like, what? I could just trace art? That's a job? That's called inker. There's all these really cool jobs that are on, they may not be what you're thinking of as your own fine art and your own art, but it's like an awesome day job to have. My first day job, I was extremely lucky. Well, I say that, but it took me over 300 jobs I applied for before I got an interview. It was the recession of 2002. And I just kind of had lost my mind, I think, and I wrote the most unprofessional cover letter I ever wrote in my life, and I faxed it. It was a New York Times print ad that I faxed, that makes me feel so old, to the Children's Book Council, which was the Association of Children's Publishers. And the whole letter was about how at like cocktail parties I would pretend that all these really like fancy like adult books were my favorite, but really I just wanted to talk about The Twits by Roald Dahl and why that was the best. And they got me an interview, and they said they had had like over 500 applicants for an entry-level receptionist job. And since then, I have actually not applied for any of my jobs. It's all about, again, not being a jerk and just being really passionate about books, because if you're passionate about books and people see that, they just want to talk to you about books, and then suddenly you become friends with that person, and suddenly they go and get promoted to an editorial job, and they bring you. And children's book world is a very wonderful place for people to help other people. There's not the same kind of competition that there is in adult worlds. My friends in adult publishing are always confused that we know each other. We all know each other. Like, we actually all knew the same person who came here to watch, and we're like, oh, no, it's here for me. World. She's like, no, she's here for all of us. But yeah, it's just a great world. So if you can get an internship, that's great, because that's just one more way to make friends with those people and kind of get to know them. Also, all editors love flattery online. If you love a book, find out who the editor was, write to them on Twitter and be like, oh my God, this was the best book I've read all year. They will look at your portfolio. I guarantee it. It's true.
Again,
you guys
Colleen
taking
is
notes?
a talented
That's very good
self-marketer.
advice. Taking notes, right?
I've hired like 3 illustrators because they complimented me.
The other comment about the MoCA, getting your artwork out in MoCA is also really, really important. That was a great comment also.
Okay, people, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, everyone.
coming. This
Thank
was a
you.
great turnout. Thank you to the panelists. It was just wonderful. So anyways, make your way to the table, and can you guys stay for a little bit longer to speak? And thanks again.